Howdy. It is Sunday. A lovely Sunday that it is. Um, so and we're going to talk about some things. I had a completely different day planned today, but some things happened um, that I want to talk about. Not necessarily to me directly, but some things happened, and I think it's really something we need to discuss. Um, so good morning, everyone. So Titan, I had wanted to talk about your question from Thursday, but like I said, some things happened, so we're going to get into it. It actually does tie into our conversation, but it's not exactly the same thing. So we'll push that back a week or so. Um, in fact, I want to do a hangout probably the next 2 weeks, so we may talk about it then. Just depends on how things go. Unfortunately, I don't make the rules; I just live by them. Um, we'll give everyone a few minutes to hop on. Titan, Mary H. Good morning. Um, anything interesting happened to anybody while y'all were out doing things since Thursday, or even before Thursday? Um, it's a new year. New things are happening. I'm having fun. Actually, sort of hit up a. Trying to think about how to say this. Okay, so like I said, we're going to give everyone a few minutes to hop on. I've been trying to come up with a new camera trap. And it's proving very difficult. What I want it to be is entirely passive, right? Um, and where we can set it up, it's hidden within objects um, that Bigfoot and some other things would sort of expect to see, but it emits no IR. That's the thing is I want no IR, no motion. It just sits there and it runs. So I've been trying to come up with that. That's harder than it looks because like if you want to spend a couple grand on a Starlight. Well, thank you, Mary H. Let me know what you think of it. Um, Good morning, Susan. Because the thing is, like a starlight, which is like when you see those green, like the green night vision, what that's doing is it's enhancing the light that's there. That's the kind of camera I wanted, but those are expensive, and I couldn't really find any cheap cameras that you could just maybe plug into. In fact, my son's going to help me do it. We're going to take an old an old not necessarily iPad, but like a tablet, and we're going to record everything onto it. It's just going to record for like say 5 hours. Um, so it's a simple enough setup, but I really wanted something that did starlight, and it's too expensive. But then everything else was like, well, yes, we have night vision. It's all infrared. I'm like, well, that's the thing I'm trying to avoid. So, and so the solution was actually just a webcam. Like some of these webcams are just they're dumb, right? They're not exactly designed to do night vision, but they are designed for low light. So that's what we're gonna try and do. So I'm excited about that, right? And we're gonna kind of set up the same thing we had last time at Brown Springs. Only what I'm going to do is take like some folding chairs, and like I said, I actually have the cooler that we used. I'm going to cut a hole into it. We'll just have the camera sitting right there, and we're going to set it up the same place they came last time. We want to have the same cameras set up in the same places, um, to sort of try, because we think the reason they went the way they were was because they could see the IR on the other cameras, and so they went that way. So we're again, it's all a test. Now, if this works, I think if this works, then I think there's going to be a reason to drop some cash, right, on some of that stuff, and we'll raise money for that. But for the most part, CIRU is just me. The Society for the Investigation and Research of the Unknown is largely me, a couple other people, but so we have to do things on the cheap. So, but we'll see if it works. Proof of concept. So we'll see what happens, right? Maybe I'm not gonna say probably nothing will happen because we don't know what's going to happen. And I do believe in thinking positively. I think that speaking positively, these things matter. We've talked about that a lot. So anyway, having fun, getting projects finished up. In fact, knocking out. I was trying to get this done last night. It just turned into a lot more work. Um, but I'll be turning this into a print, but it's for a friend of mine. So let me back it up a little bit here, see if the camera can focus in on it. So yeah, there we are. So I can knock that out, I'm hoping to get it finished today. A lot of detail, and I got a second gift here. Once I'm done with that, like I'm done with everything. I got 2 comics I want to do for for submission. I got to finish up, but then after that, I'm done. That's the other gift. So this is what I've been doing the last couple days. Getting all these other projects sort of off my desk, so I can, because what I want to do is, and we've sort of talked about it, but we'll talk about it here. I trust y'all to keep things on the down low. But like with Texas channel, we're trying to figure out some other things to do, some fun things. And one of the things I'd wanted to do for a while, and actually kind of did it years and years ago, was do I think I'll probably keep it bi-weekly for now, just to be safe. But sort of like, the old Ripley's Believe It or Not comic strips where you'd have like 1 or 2 things, but it's like, here's something new that you've never seen or heard of. I'm going to do that, but it's going to focus on cryptozoology, ufology, and forbidden archaeology. But I kind of want to go a lot of weird historical events and oddities and things like that. So I'd like to start knocking those out, and we'll see if we can't find a way to do it in an entertaining way on YouTube, right? So it won't just be things on Facebook that you can share, which it will be, but put them online. Find a way to do it interestingly on YouTube. So we're going to work on it, and I'd like to do that. A couple other things I'd like to do is, like I said, with our friend Alan, right? Okay, Titan, great question. We just didn't even get a chance to talk about it last time. We were going to talk about it. So here's the thing. That beard that he has now is not worth shaving. Actually, I think we did talk about this. By the way, it's not worth shaving yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back over. We did not lose the weight we wanted. He got sick. Life happens. So we're going to go. We're going back. We're sort of starting from zero. So we both lost weight, but not the weight we wanted. So, and I didn't want to have him shave his beard because it was, there's no victory in shaving the beard he has right now. You know what I mean? Like, I want that full ZZ top thing to just poof. So we're doing it again this year. So again, it's 100 pounds from where we are now, which means I would have lost like 130 pounds overall. And him about the same. Again, I'm still going to win. That's not even a question. I think technically I still won by the rules of the bet. But I really want to do more, and so that's gonna be the other thing, is actually keeping that going. We will be monitoring that and we'll do that as an update. But I want that beard I want the luscious beard that he has yeah, that'll be fun. In fact, since it'll be past all this stupidity that is the COVID world we live in, I think we shave that on camera. Yeah. I think we find a way to do that. Might be a cell phone video, but it'll happen. Maybe like a special event or something. I don't know, but it'll be fun. So we're going to do it. I'm dropping 100 pounds. He will drop like 99 pounds. Or maybe I'll lose more and he'll lose 100 pounds. I'll just lose more. I'm cool with it either way. Just saying. But that beard is going away. So yes, we are doing it, but we're doing it this year. Just because the world was just, yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. The investigation team specifically right now, that's being led by, that's Texas thing. Ciru is an open thing, right? And I'd like to do, and I am going to be doing more with Ciru this year. You're going to start seeing Ciru pop up a lot more. And it's very much, it's open to everyone. Like, I don't like memberships per se. There's some things for like emails that I'm going to be doing. There's a lot to do. I think it'll probably start more in February. But yeah, y'all are here. Your family. That's what we do. It's the craziness. The other thing, I'm going to start creating comics. Like I mentioned this. You're going to fold in half, and we're going to be sending them and emailing them to Alan. So I want to start working on those probably towards the end of the month. So yeah, lots of fun things over here. Let us know what y'all are doing. Obviously, email us. You know my email. It's Ciru Papers. I'm also going to try and find a way. I'm going to write up a sort of a permanent description. I know I don't do descriptions. I like it's just me. I got a lot of things to do, but I'm going to create a permanent description that's going to have links to those other guys who talk politics stuff, because that channel I want to, like I said, this I want just let's keep it to y'all. Like y'all are like, hey, I got a friend. You find a friend. You're like, hey, let's listen to this guy. Fine, but I don't want this channel to be like 2,000 people or 10,000 or 50,000. But this other, those other guys, I think they would like a slightly higher view count, and I think their message is going to be very needed because they're going to be doing some really interesting things this year. Um, and that actually ties and leads into what I want to talk about today. So, and like I said, the description is going to have links to those channels that we're friends with and that we promote, like Likewise Ministries, and we'll have Siru in there, and we'll have some other things as well. Like I said, Siru, I want to convert that website mostly. I want to convert into a museum, a creation museum, a flood museum, probably not a flood museum, but a biblical worldview museum. Probably that's the best way to say it. It's a biblical worldview museum that gives you evidence for the flood, cryptozoology from the physical, from the paranormal, and ufology, and very much create an maybe not anti, but a take the ancient astronaut theory and dispel it. Now, there'll be other things involved in there as well, because I really like this idea of dispelling the Dan Brown thing. This Jesus got married and had a kid bull crap. What's worse is dispelling it. I'm gonna say this, then we'll go back to what I was saying before, because here's my thing. Ultimately, the worst part about Dan Brown, it's a fiction book, and I know people are like, well, but it's based on. No, it's not. Quick question. There's no evidence it even happened. There's no evidence. Like we have, I mean, a ton of writing from the early church fathers debating everything. I mean, everything about Jesus, about his disciples, about what percentage, I mean, everything about him was debated. And you're telling me that in the first 2-3 centuries of the Christian church, which was under Roman persecution at the time, wrote about everything, debated everything, but they forgot to mention his kids? It's literally, it's just completely nuts. And everyone's like, well, but how will you know it's not true? Well, because Dan Brown made it, he made it up. It's like, it's not a thing. It wasn't a thing. It's largely based entirely on just random thoughts. Like there is a point where we have to stop and say, look, just saying, but what if is not evidence, right? I mean, we talk about this in cryptozoology all the time, but it's like, well, but what if they stop right there? It's like, stop right there. You're creating a phenomena to explain these other things. Like there's no evidence for it. You're just making up out of whole cloth. So yeah, I mean, it's Dan Brown, like dispelling that is, it just feels like, I know it needs to happen. Because actually, I know a friend. She'd come to Christ, but fell away because of Dan Brown. Like that, she read the book and she left the faith, and I'm like, this is insane. So I agree, it needs to be dispelled. It's like trying to dispel the idea that Spider-Man is real. I mean, it's that insane. It's like, but he's a comic book character. Like I got a lunchbox. I mean, he's not real. But no, we're going to do that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But going back to those other guys with their conversations that they're going to be having this next year, they're going to take a very different approach from how they've been doing things. Is sort of kind of what I want to talk. So one of the things I think they're going to be talking about is what I want to talk about today. Because again, I don't want this to be. This is not a political channel. But if we are Christians in the world today, we can't not engage in the world. That doesn't mean engaging in politics. Particularly, we've always said this is sort of I'm not a prophet. I'll be very clear. I'm not a prophet, but I do have a prophetic gifting. What that means is I work within the realm of prophecy, and that means engage in one of the roles of the prophet is engaging in the political. So we're going to talk about that because I think there's a broader concept we need to talk about that we actually ran across on Thursday, and it's going to affect some things we do today. But as far as actual, how should we be doing things? How should we be handling um, the world as Christians politically? I'm gonna leave that to them. But they're gonna have some interesting things. Like I said, I'll put their link in the upcoming descriptions. I'm gonna try and do that today. Um, but like I said, there is some aspects of the political we really need to discuss today, because this is where I think, and I've said this before, I think we have been trained to be good Christians, and I don't think and I don't think we were actually being good Christians, right? We were, I think we've been trained to be passive, and we need to re-examine some things, because I don't think that's what God wants us to be. We're supposed to be active. So we're going to talk about that, and I'll preface everything with what I've heard the last couple of days that really made me want to do this. But first, as always, let's open with some prayer, because this guy needs it a lot for a lot of reasons. Heavenly Father, we come before you now, and we thank you and we praise you for all that you've done. Father, you are holy, and you've called us to be holy. We pray that your Spirit would guide us towards holiness, that we would recall and remember that your word tells us that we can be. Heavenly Father, help us to reject the world when it says we can't be what you've called us to be. Heavenly Father, remind us that we are powerful and that we are strong because you have made us so. It is not our strength that we have, but yours. Heavenly Father, guide us towards your truth and your truth only. Help us to speak when others have told us to stay silent. Help us to be silent when it is called for. Help us to have strength and courage when strength and courage are called for. I pray all these things in the name of your Son, Christ Jesus, through whom all things are possible. Amen. Now, let me put my glasses back on so I can see. Hello, Mr. D. Knuckle. So, let's start back with what happened since Thursday that made me sort of rethink this episode, and why I want to do things this way. Why I want to re-examine a few concepts. So Louis Gohmert the other day was on Newsmax. He had put forward a lawsuit that again, with this whole election thing, and again the courts, as they have on a lot of these things, have said that, well, just no one has standing. And his whole point was, hold up, I'm a congressman. This affects my vote. This affects the votes of my constituents. If I don't have standing, nobody else does. So they had him on Newsmax, and one of the things he said was, if there is no legal redress for when we're sitting here saying, whoa, 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 this is bad, like something has clearly happened, we need it examined. That's all anyone's asked for. And they said, here's this evidence, we need it looked at. We need to be able to, there has to be some sort of legal conversation and legal recourse. He's like, if that doesn't happen, all that's left is for those in the right to become as violent as Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And I found it sort of surprising, because he's not Louis, he's a Texan. He's not prone to these kinds of conversations. And this is a feeling I've had for a while. I'm like, and I've told people sort of off air, like, guys, there's a problem here, because if this isn't resolved, like if we don't have a free legal system where we can have our voices heard and have a redress of complaint, if that doesn't exist, there's nowhere but violence. There's just no place left. And I heard him say that, and then I heard Bevelyn Beatty the other day was talking about how she's like, I've had it with these fake Republicans. Now, I want to refine her thought a little bit, because I think she's still thinking if you're on the right, you got to be a Christian. I know she doesn't think that. Like, I don't want to put any words in her mouth, and that's not what she's necessarily saying. Because I like she did bring up the quote from it's one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, but or maybe it was the Constitution. Anyway, he called himself a Christocrat, and she referenced that. I'm like, yeah, I think that's a great way of expressing it. But she was like, well, great, we have these Democrats walking away. And it was like, well, where should they go? And she's like, to Jesus. That's where we need to be sending them. And I agree with that. But I'd like to take her thought one step further. What we need to do as a church is Christians, we need to realize we are not Republicans. We're not libertarians. We're not any of those things, right? It's I just saw the fundamentalist question. I'm going to respond to you in a second on that one. But rather that we are Christians. We need to realize we are separate from all of this. Now, will we work with them? Yes, and we'll explain why. But we need to realize we need to take that step back even further and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. No. We're not playing for your team. We have our team. We're playing for our team, and we will work with you to achieve certain goals. But we're not on your team. And if you stop doing those things that we want, we're gone. Like, that needs to be something that needs to be understood. And that's not the position we're taking. We're just, we're like, well, where else will we go? Well, that's not, I don't think the way it should be. And that's what she was talking about. And so I was hearing all this, and this was all rattling around in my head. And I thought, there was a conversation that we had on Thursday about the chaos and the versus wilderness. And I'm like, we really need to talk about that a little bit more, because it ties into the concept of dominion. And I think there's a bigger concept here that I don't think I explained fully. And I certainly don't think I did as good a job as I could have, but I think it's really important that we do. And maybe the reason I didn't do a good job, I don't feel like I did a good job describing it. So God's like, because you need to do this on Sunday. Perfect. And for mentalist, yes. I'm enjoying Bachelor of Babylon. Well, technically, this is season 40. Would you call it 45 or 46? Because either way, yeah, okay, yeah, season 33 works for me. I like the gag, and it is. I'm enjoying it. It's going to be fun, but I do think there's an importance here. And let's go back to this concept that we sort of brushed on, and it's the difference between chaos and wilderness. So when we talked about Genesis 1 through 2, 3, or 4, depending on how you want to read it, one of the things I mentioned was that one of the theological implications that sets the Old Testament creation story away from these others is that God doesn't fight. Jehovah does not fight a chaos dragon. Like, in fact, so let's go back to that concept of Tiamat, right? Tiamat, Lotan, same sort of concept, just that's a Ugaritic verb or term or name. It's the chaos dragon that is slain by Marduk or by Baal Hadad, depending on which tradition you're going with. And that's how the world is made. Well, but in Genesis, Jehovah shows up and he's like, or is there, and he's like, there's no chaos, or the chaos, because that word, right, that's used for the abyss is essentially Tiamat. Like, it's essentially the same derivative. And so if you were Old Testament, you were reading that, if you're someone living in Israel at the time, you'd be like, oh, I get what you're saying here. There was no fight because he already had it under control. There is no chaos dragon for him to slay because it ain't there. He already has it. He's so powerful, it's already under control. So there's that theological messaging there. And when we talk about why, the difference between the animals, right? There's the wilderness animals and there's the animals in Eden, and why they seem to be created twice. And I talked about, one of the things that we were supposed to do is, as humans, is go out into the world and have dominion over it. We were to bring order to chaos. That's how I explained it. And of course, I think it was Titan rightly asked and said, well, hold up. How could there be chaos in the world if there was no chaos when God created it, right? Um, and yeah, well, so that's why I wanted to explain, right? Is what is the concept of chaos? And point out that what we're talking about when I talk about man going out into the world, it's not the chaos is not really the right word. It's wilderness. And I want to talk about the difference between the two. Firstly, the Canaanite mind, that sort of early Semitic mind. So yeah, fundamentalist has a great point, right? Let me put that up because it's chaos had to be non-existent at some point, right? Um, and that's sort of the whole idea is that chaos to the early Semitic mind was a lack of order or function, right? So when you come to all of these early um, myths, the idea was that they even all sort of had this idea like the world existed to a point, but it was disordered, and you had to destroy chaos to put everything into order. But God, again, from the Bible, Jehovah is like, no, I don't have to defeat anything. It's already there. There is, and what he's doing is as he's creating, he's putting things into order. So, hey, Image 1953. So there's this putting order to chaos concept that the Bible says there was no chaos because God already had everything under control. He creates it, he puts an order to it. We're groovy, right? But we do have the command, and I have it brought up here because I can do this. I can't do the images like the satellite things. I can't do that, but I can do Blue Letter Bible. By the way, if y'all don't use blueletterbible.org, I highly suggest you do. I think that's a link I'll put up in the future descriptions because it's a great resource. It's very simple to use. Um, but so he talks about having dominion, right? And it's a well, okay. So let me first go back to what does wilderness mean. Maybe we'll start back over. So the word wilderness, right? We see it all throughout the Old Testament. It's often the word midbar. Again, don't ever quote my pronunciation. And it has a number of meanings that I like, but the big one that is uh, really important to us is uninhabited land, right? I mean, even in English, wilderness just basically means uninhabited. And again, very specifically, uninhabited meaning uninhabited by human beings. There can be all kinds of animals running around, who cares? But it's uninhabited by human beings because human beings bring civilization. Now, that could be nomads. That's still inhabited. It's inhabited by the nomads. They are bringing a sense of order. They are doing things while there. It's being productive. Um, so this idea of it's so God is the one who's destroyed. There's no chaos because God already has everything in order. When God is done creating things, right? He has put everything to order. Everything is good, but the land is uninhabited. That's why he creates humans. He gives us dominion so we can go out into the wilderness and subdue it. And this is where the dominion comes in, right? It's the dominion or the word dominion that we translate as dominion is rada, and it literally just means to rule, to have dominion, to reign over. We are the ruler of. Um, I do like it also means to scrape out, right? Or to cause to dominate. And it's all throughout the Old Testament over having dominion. When Pharaoh had dominion over the, it doesn't usually it's not translated as dominion specifically. I think it's rulership, but um, it's over the Hebrew slaves. Like this is not a passive word. This is a very active word. It is a word that this is an active dominion over the entire world, all, the landmass, the animals. That's what we're supposed to bring to it, and we're supposed to go out and do it. And so where God has chaos, we have wilderness, right? It's a lesser, higher thing, but we have to have dominion. Like, we're called to do it, to bring civilization to the wilderness. That's what we're called to do, and to bring that stewardship that we had in Eden. Because remember, he puts Adam in the garden within Eden in order to tend to it, to maintain it. We are supposed to do that in the outside world, to the rest of this wilderness. And it is there that I want to discuss where all this stuff comes together, right? Right, not over other people, the wilderness. Humanity as a whole is to branch out over the earth. Mr. Denacle, it's a great point. We're not supposed to have dominion over the people. We're supposed to have dominion over the earth, over the animals, over the land. We are. MH 1953. Let's come back to that idea and remind me, because I like that. But what is wilderness? I want to sort of re-explore this idea. What is wilderness? Wilderness is land that's uninhabited, which is, it's interesting because it also means south, and that means it's like, why would south mean uninhabited land? Well, what's south of Israel? The Saudi Arabia Peninsula. Like, it's kind of a big desert. Like, there's nothing there. I mean, that's, for them, it's like, well, why would we want to go there? Like, in fact, if you look at most of these empires, right? Saudi, like, it's just like, when you see the line, they're like, here's North Africa and here's the Middle East, and they're like, they just sort of jump over Saudi Arabia because they're like, why would anyone want to go there? They didn't even bother to claim it. They're like, nope, why bother? It's just a thing. So we see that, but the idea is that it's uninhabited, which means you don't have civilization, you don't have law, and then this is where things get even more into the Semitic mind that's different from us. You can have people running around and it still be technically uninhabited to the Semitic mind. Why? Because it was about the bringing of presence of law, presence of justice. Because, and this is where, and we'll tie this in MH 1953's question. Something we forget is that oftentimes we are referred to in particularly very much extra biblical materials that we found, but also in the book of Job, there's this allusion to us being beasts of the field, that we are creatures of the sixth day. And it's, if there is no law or order, right? There's no civilization, there's no law, there's no justice. In the Hebrew mindset, that means the justice of God, the law of God. Then you have wilderness, even if there's people living there, because they're not living in a lawful manner. They're behaving erratically. They're behaving sinfully. They are behaving in a way that's counterproductive. And so it's still considered wilderness. So it's not just the idea that there isn't someone living there, but that humans have a moral obligation to bring law. They have a moral obligation to bring God's justice to the world in which they live. And if that's not present, it's still wilderness. So it's not. So on one level, it's just about, it's uninhabited, but on that next level, you can have people living in the wilderness where there's no law, there's no justice, and it's into that mindset. That's the same thing. That's where we are now. Like I mentioned before, I think one of the big problems we have is we've been trained and taught for so long to be good Christians means we're to be almost fundamentally passive. We're not supposed to fight back. We're not, and I don't mean physically, but we're not supposed to really stand our ground. We're supposed to seek peace. Peace meaning lack of conflict, not presence of justice. That's a problem, because God calls us as humans, and of course that means doubly on us, to have dominion over the world, which means we are to leave Eden and tend to the field of the world. And this fight that we have is about the fight between wilderness and civilization, wilderness and the presence and law of God. If Christians don't fight this fight, if we don't choose to have that dominion, then what happens? We have what we have now. We have what we're seeing now, where you have, well, hold on, 1953, that's turning the other cheek. That's about physical violence towards us. I'm not talking about physical violence. I'm talking about actually fighting for your ideas and beliefs. We see that all throughout the New Testament. When they were told not to do the right thing, they said, the apostles said, no, I'm going to keep doing this right thing. You can choose to, you can do what you want to do. I'm never going to disobey God. What we've been asked to do as Christians, I would argue for the last 100 years or so, maybe even more, is to not fight and make the argument. We're supposed to say, but these people are offended. Well, then I'm going to stop saying things. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to stop advocating for what's right, because I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to, that's what I'm talking about. We don't respond in violence, but we are not supposed to be silent. We're not supposed to be quiet. We're not supposed to just let this chaos, this wilderness that is always present, to win. And that is the big difference here. We have to change our thought pattern. Where'd you go? See, Titan. No, it's not you. You know what, Titan? I'm not really seeing your previous comment here. So well, so Titan, can you repost it? Because I'm not seeing your other comment. I don't know if it got blocked or what. The attitude of turning the other cheek and not arguing, I don't think is. Let's see, 11:18. Let's see what time. So here's the thing: there is a difference between turning the other cheek and not arguing, because arguing is or making an argument, right, is not what Jason. Sorry, I'm reading Titan's thing. Yes, exactly, Titan. So let me put the exact things right. The church has been arguing for us to be nice. I think it's a great way of putting it. There is a complete difference between being nice and being good. In MH 1953, we've been told to turn the other cheek, but that's not the appropriate way. I think we have been radically misinterpreting that verse. The apostles never stopped arguing for Christ, did they? They never stopped arguing for protecting the poor, right? We are not supposed to stop these things, but we have been told, well, hold on, if someone's offended by what you're saying, then you're supposed to stop. That is not what that verse means, because Jesus said, if someone strikes you, right, we don't return violence for violence. If violence is exacted upon us because we're Christians, we're not supposed to return violence. That's what that's about. That's certainly not about making. That is certainly not about not arguing for what is good or right. We are supposed to, and again, the initial role that we as humans are supposed to have is to bring order, right, to the wilderness. We have to have a bigger backbone than we've been having for a very long time. Being nice and being good are, I think Titan has the right concept here. Those are not the same thing. Because here's the thing, if we don't have that backbone, if we don't make clear arguments, if we don't stand for what is good and right and noble, if we don't call a spade, if we don't call balls and strikes according to the word of God, what's going to happen? What we have right now. A world, because we have to remember, and I know everyone's like, but this is a Christian nation. Bull crap. The next person who says this is a Christian nation, you need to laugh in their face. It's not. If by a Christian nation you mean a nation that was built on the premise, and that the founding fathers looked at the Bible, they looked at the teachings of Judeo-Christian philosophy, right? Sure, that was the inspiration, that was the foundation upon which our documents were written, completely. But if you think for a second, it means that the majority of people in this country are Christian, you're wrong. In fact, let me take it one step further. The vast majority of people who go to church on Sunday are not Christians. We know this. How? By the rest of their work on Monday, Monday through Saturday. I'm not saying everyone who's a Christian doesn't sin. We all sin. We all fall short. We're trying to be better. But you can judge these things and be like, hold up. These don't go together. They just don't. The vast majority of people who are going to church on Sunday or who call themselves a Christian are simply, they're just doing it out of tradition, or they want to be a good person. They don't actually have faith in Christ. They don't have a relationship with the Holy Spirit. How do we know? Because we got a bunch of churches with psychics and witches in them now. And I'm not talking some super secret thing. I mean, publicly, they're like, I am a Christian psychic. I am a Christian witch. Right now, the vast majority of churches are not Christian churches. They are self-help groups. They are entertainment venues. They're places to go and hang out, and they may eventually somewhere mention Jesus, but it ain't enough. And they sure as the world aren't going to tell you, hey, you're in sin, get out of it. They're going to make you comfortable in your sin. It's the touched by an angel concept, where it's like, here's an angel. It's like, oh, it's an angel. It's good. It's Christian. Well, hold up, but this angel ain't talking about Jesus. It's God loves everyone. God would never hurt anyone. He doesn't want to sin. Hell's not a real thing. Look at the numbers. The vast majority of people who claim to be Christians don't even believe in the concept of hell. That's not Christian. We are not a Christian nation. We need to understand that we live in a world, the vast majority are not Christian. Period, end of story. Great. So we can't expect them to behave like Christians. What we need to do is fight for those things. We need to realize that we are called to have dominion, right? It is not, being passive is no longer an option, because when we're passive, the world becomes violent. The world returns to wilderness. Why? Because the wilderness is always there. It's always present. If anyone who's come across a house that was abandoned for more than 10 years, you know this, right? If people aren't constantly coming in to take care of it and re-update things and whatever, within a few years, that house is full of animals and trees are growing, things are growing into it. You have human society takes care. We have to be actively tending it, because if we don't, the wilderness will creep in. Look at Chernobyl, radioactive catastrophe, and yet in the 30 years now since it's occurred, wilderness has returned. It's just crawling with plants. Nature this wilderness will always consume it. Humans have to be tending it. Like, for a garden to stay in order, a human has to go out there and remove the weeds and tend to the crops. Just how it works. Society is no different. If we are going to be passive, if we are not going to stand against evil, if we are not going to call a spade, yes, fundamentalist, then we're going to have wilderness. And the problem with wilderness is that it's the law of the jungle. That's what Louis Gohmert's alluding to. If there is no law, if there is no rational redress of ills, if there is no hearing, if there is no justice, then there is no society. All that is left is violence, and people will get violent. Heck, we'll get violent over our sports team winning the Super Bowl. We'll get violent over a Tickle Me Elmo doll. You think we're not going to get violent? You think that society is not going to get violent if 70 plus million, probably closer to 80 million people think think their votes were disenfranchised and there's no way to redress it? You think that people who've had their businesses destroyed by totalitarian governors and mayors are going to stay quiet when they can see BLM and Antifa burning down whole cities and nothing happening? You think these that those in the right, when they do a protest, they get pepper sprayed, they get arrested when Antifa is actually physically attacking them? And by the way, that's been happening for years, people. Let me remind everyone, because I know it doesn't get reported a lot. Christians and conservatives get arrested when being attacked by leftists. Think about that. This has been happening for years. This is not a 2020 into 2021 thing. This has been happening for decades. Christians get arrested for preaching on street corners when someone comes up and is like, "Yeah, I'm gay and I don't like that." They get arrested. Conservatives have been assaulted by Antifa and others, and they, in that response, the Antifa or the leftist member is allowed to go free, but the conservatives get arrested. You can't have this type of society and not expect extreme violence to erupt. It's going to happen. Now, it's at this point where most people are like, well, let's blame the leftists. Let's blame the liberals. No, as I've said for months now, I blame the church. Our role in the society is to be salt and light. Are we salt and light? No. No, we're not. Straight up. If we were salt, our society would not be as tasteless as it is. Just wouldn't be. But we're not. We haven't been, because we've been told to be, as Titan put it, nice, but not good. I think back to that line in Narnia when I forget which one of the characters asks if Aslan was nice, right? Mm-hmm. Titan. And the response to the child's question isn't when she asks, well, is he nice or is he safe? I think it was is he safe? And she goes, oh, he is not safe, but he is good. That is Jesus to a T. We have to remember, Jesus turned over the tables. Everyone, because I mean, let's face it, the modern church would look at Jesus and be like, Jesus, you're not being very Jesus-like, turning over tables. You had a whip. We'd be like, that's not very Christ-like. Maybe the problem is we have the wrong idea of what Christ is. Let's remember what happens when Jesus returns. A lot of Christians would call that not Christ-like either. But he's not safe. Jesus is not safe. He's good. We have to be good, not nice. To be good means you are active. Because being good in this world requires action. You can't be good not disengaged. When you're disengaged, evil wins. What is Bonhoeffer's most famous quote? All that is required for evil to prosper is good men to do nothing. We are seeing what happens when good men do nothing. And of course that means women. We have allowed the church to, again, church system. There's always the remnant. We are of the remnant. I say that without hesitation. But we've allowed the church system to be impotent and to be weak because we believed that we were supposed to be nice. We are not called to be nice. We're called to have dominion. We are salt and we are light. Salt, if you just grab a handful of salt and throw it in your mouth, you're going to know you've done it. And let's think about salt for just a moment. How was salt used in the ancient world? Was it used for flavoring? Of course it was. But was that its primary use? No. It was used in preserving food. Remember, they didn't have refrigeration 2,000 years ago, 500 years ago. If you want to eat, and you want, after the crops were tended, if you want to preserve that meat, you had to salt it. You would use salt to preserve it so it wouldn't go bad. I think the metaphor is pretty obvious at this point, right? I mean, going bad, salt. I think you get it. Y'all smart people. I have my question about firmamentalist, but yeah. It's We have not been doing our job. Let me phrase this. The church system has not done its job. You have to do the job. Like I said a few months ago, um, the sort of realization I had is like, I'm doing all this because I looked around, I couldn't find people doing it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were a few, but not enough. And they certainly weren't making my arguments. So I'm like, okay, we need to do this. I need to stand up and do this. And I've said for the last 2 years, I'm like, it's, um, sorry, I just saw a fundamentalist quote. We're going to talk about that. Then we can end with the whole MH1953's concept about, or question about Sasquatch. I would have said, I'm doing this because pastors aren't doing their job. And one day, I think it was a couple months ago, I was like, well, hold on. Maybe the problem is I wasn't doing my job. Because let's face it, what I'm doing, this is a niche thing. Arguing, trying to create an argument against trying to create an argument against ancient astronaut theory, I think is a much more, like, that's the religion of the 21st century. Everyone should be involved in that, but I get it. But, how does cryptozoology and all this fit into a biblical worldview? That's a niche thing. That's for me to do, right? Um, it okay, man. Y'all are making some great quotes. So let me just wrap this up. We all have jobs to do. We cannot rely on the church system to do our job. We have to make stands. We have to make arguments. We have to call a spade a spade. We have to look and say, hey, you're not doing right and you're not doing wrong. One of the reasons a lot of these pastors haven't been talking about politicians who are doing evil things is because they don't want to lose their tax write-offs. They want to be 501c3 compliant. That's it. They got bought out decades ago. We can't. And we need to start standing for these things. To live up to our call. God created us to have dominion over this earth. That means to bring civilization and justice, God's justice and righteousness, to the wilderness. The wilderness can include people. This nation is now the wilderness. We have to change our perspective. It is the wilderness. We have to bring justice to it, or we lose everything that this nation can provide. Let me phrase this. Because we will always have Christ. We will always have our salvation, and we will always keep working towards calling those to salvation that we can. That never changes. Like I said, people are like, well, what happened? People ask me, how does what you're doing change if Trump's reelected or not? Nothing. Trump being in office doesn't affect what I'm going to do. It may affect how I do it, though, because maybe I can't be on YouTube anymore in a few years. Because let's be honest, the Republicans we have there, they're not doing anything to really stop the suppression of Christian conservative speech on YouTube, are they? Maybe things get a little bit harder to finance because, Biden wins, our economy is going to go to crap. We're going to get sold out to China. But that's the ease of what I do. That's where I do it. It's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing doesn't change and should never change, because what we do as Christians should always preach the gospel, tend to the poor, seek justice. We live in a world where we have direct influence on whether or not justice happens in our world. This is a rarity in human history. We have to engage in it, and we have to take. And I would imagine God doesn't look favorably on the fact that He's like, you've got this country where you have a voice and you don't use it. That's on you, and that's a failure for you. The vast majority of humans have never enjoyed the privilege of having a say in their government. We do. So we'll end that conversation there. So Titan, we'll just go upwards here. Titan says Jefferson's letter to Danbury Baptist said, "How I wished there were a wall between church and state," meaning that there isn't and should not be. That is true. That there shouldn't, because Jefferson was at best a deist. But this separation of church and state was meant to go one way. It was not that the churches should not separate. Should not. What we've got is, well, the church should have nothing to do with the government, and that's a lie. The setup was the government should have nothing to do with the church, meaning the government cannot tell the church what to say, what to do, how to behave, any of that. It was complete. It was, in fact, it was to, but the church was supposed to have influence on our government. We were supposed to be the ones who said what is right, what is wrong. All of the founding fathers absolutely preached that. They said, no, we need the teachings of the Bible. There is no greater moral teaching than this. Even Jefferson, who again, famous deist, we always talk about the Jefferson Bible, where he went and cut up a Bible, removing all the miraculous stuff from, but he kept the moral teachings of it, because he's like, this is the greatest moral teaching in the world. Why would we get rid of it? Like one of the first things that one of the first acts of the American Congress was to print Bibles. Straight up, the church was supposed to have influence of the government, but now it's reversed. The government tells the churches what to do. They can tell us when to shut down, when to open up. They can put you in they can fine you for even reading certain passages now out in California. That's not how this is supposed to be. There was not supposed to be a wall between the church influencing the state. We haven't been influencing the state, and this is where we are. We have to call a spade a spade. We have to be salt, and we have to be light. Salt preserves, light illuminates. Cockroaches run away from the light. Just saying. Fundamentalists said that the meek shall inherit the earth was not a good thing. It was a warning. Meek pastors and Christians is how we got into this mess. Yeah, I would agree with that. Meek pastors and meek Christians is exactly what we've been talking about. Meekness is not necessarily the thing that we are well, let me rephrase this. I think we have been redefining words. Meek meaning that we are not going to stand for the right things. That if someone gets offended, we're going to be like, well, if you're offended by it, then I'm not going to say it. No. Sometimes people need to be offended. I'm sorry, the truth is offensive. You don't like the fact that gravity exists. I can't help you. It does. Straight up. Jesus is the stone of offense. We have to remember that. Jesus is the most offensive thing to this earth. We have to remember that. We can't just... Well, hold on. That's what I'm saying. But no. I get what you're saying for a minute, but I'm saying straight up, the meekness that we've been preaching for years is not the meekness of the Bible. That is not. There is a difference between being violent and being under control, and then being the meek as we don't put up a fight. We just allow people to run over us. That is not the meekness of the Bible. That's not what the early church did. That's certainly not what Jesus did. We are afraid to speak the truth. That's the sort of meekness that we've been. That is the meekness. That's the same weakness that we're talking about. This Mary H. Self-defense. So that's a great question. There is, when Jesus told his disciples to sell their cloak and buy a sword, the sword he was talking about, actually, hold on, I don't have it here. We think of swords as like this, right? But that's because we come, a European sword, which I don't happen to have handy at the moment. But that's not what Christ was referring to. He was referring to something more like this. Something about the length of my ruler, my drafting ruler here, right? 18 inches in total, right? Single-handed, short sword. Maybe some may even shorter, right? More like, we would consider it more like a larger hunting knife or a Bowie knife is what they would have used. Those knives were meant for self-defense. They were also meant for creating fires, for butchering game that you had killed while you were traveling, right? It was a survival tool. And we have plenty of instances, both in the Old Testament and the Apocrypha, and in history of Christians sometimes having to defend themselves. The question becomes, why are you getting violent? And I always leave this down to this. If I'm walking down the street one day and I hear the cries of a woman being assaulted by a man, and I'm like, well, there's nothing I can do because I'm supposed to be meek, then I'm allowing evil to exist. I'm allowing evil to happen. I have an obligation to intervene and to do what I can to stop evil from occurring. That you can't, and this is one of those things that we have to remember. Defense is not offense, and more importantly, the presence of justice requires and demands a degree of violence. It does. Now, here's the difference. We don't use violence to enforce our beliefs. We don't use violence to proselytize. We do not use violence to enforce our will upon others. We can't. Also, the governmental structure, authority has been given to the government by God to do these things, to mete out justice. That's why it is so important that we have a say in the government. This is why it's so important that we advocate for what is good, so that the government will encourage those things that are good and punish that which is evil. We aren't doing that anymore. We tend to punish what is good and to allow evil to prosper. The reason government even exists. Titan, I like it. I'll put that on the board. In fact, I will write that down. Hold on. If I don't write it down, I'm going to forget. Thank you. I'm going to write it down so I don't forget, because I have ADOS, attention deficit. Ooh, shiny. We have to be active in the government, because if we don't, it's not going to do the right thing. It can't, because the government's made up of people, sinful human beings. Again, remember, the vast majority of the people in our nation are not actually Christian. Humans and even Christians are corruptible. Have we not learned that? We have to call people to account. This is where the salt and the light is required. That's why we have to be these things. But defense, yes, we can be violent in defense. And sometimes we have to be violent in defense of other people, because we cannot allow evil to exist. We shouldn't. If we do, then we've erred. Now, and I'm going to be honest, this is where I have some real struggle personally. We're going to go along because I do want to answer Image 1953's question about Sasquatch, because I think it's a great point. Today, we look back on Christians who lived during the age of slavery, and we're like, why didn't they more violently oppose this very clearly evil situation? And we asked that, or I've heard friends ask that, and I stop and I'm like, but can't the same be said for us? We're not waiting until every abortion clinic is closed, right? So we know there's no people in it, and just go and burn them down. We don't do that. And we do that because we believe in the rule of law. We do that because we believe that, again, we are called not to be proactively violent, but you can make the argument, since these clinics exist to murder innocent children, that our lack of violence upon them is allowing evil. And this is a hard one. I have to default to, we have laws. We have a say in the laws that exist. That's why our fight has to be in the hearts and minds of people and legally. But I do wonder if in a century from now, we don't look back at this period and have our descendants and us as princes and kings looking back saying, yeah, man, we did not handle that well. We allowed the murder of millions and millions of children. And because of that, not only did millions and millions of children die directly, but indirectly. A lot of these women who are going are and getting these are sex workers. They're being abused by their pimps. A lot of these, in fact, as we've learned through Project Veritas, there's a lot of these. We don't know what the proportions are, but there's a lot of these young underage children who are being trafficked, and they're just getting abortions so they can keep them turning. I've often wondered if 100 years from now, when we look back on this and say, and have people ask us and be like, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you go again? You didn't have to hurt anybody, just go burn down a building after it had closed. And the only defense I have is the same defense I think a lot of people who opposed slavery 200 years ago had, which is, we live in a society of laws. Our obligation was to work within those structures, so far as we could. And that's what I rest on, and I hope that it's the right answer. I think that violence should be used only in defense, and only in defense at a time when there is no other recourse. 100 years from now, people may look back and say, y'all screwed that one up. But right now, that's the best I got. Best I got is we're not supposed to we should never instigate violence if it is not necessary. And plus, I would argue that there's a bigger argument to be made in the hearts and minds of people. And I don't think that acting in violence is the way to gain that. I don't think that's what Jesus called us to do. There were lots of evils in the Roman world that Jesus could have told his apostles and his followers to violently oppose. He didn't. I have to take that as a meaning that we are not meant to necessarily go around trying to fix all of society's ills through violence. In fact, we should probably avoid that at all possible costs. We have to be the ones who heal, not the ones who bring violence. But we are supposed to be the ones who bring justice. We're supposed to be the ones who advocate for what is right. That's oftentimes a much harder road to walk. Enforcing your will through the use of a gun is easy. Changing the hearts and minds of a society is hard. It takes patience. It takes diligence. And I'm going to be honest, patience and diligence has not really described the American church, has it? Like I said, I don't blame the liberals and the communists for the way the world is right now. I blame the church, because the church system has not done what it was supposed to do. It has not advocated. It has not boldly proclaimed the gospel. It has not stood on truth. It has very often acquiesced. It would rather be tax deductible than to call out a politician. That's why we are where we are right now. That's why it's so important that we make that stand. That we say, nope, that's not happening. We're going to stand for truth. And unfortunately, that means we have to do it. Everyone watching this, live, recorded, your friends, we have to publicly make these comments. We have to argue for what is good and right, or the world's going to fall apart. It's going to fall into wilderness. And the wilderness is the law of the jungle. That's where the strong abuse the weak. That's not what we're supposed to live for. Now, MH1953 had a great question about this whole dominion, right? By the way, she also mentioned that, there it is. Churches are places to make you feel better about yourself just because you are in a building. Yeah. I can't argue that. Fundamentalists did mention, and I like this idea of, smaller faith-based, high-trust homesteading communities. And I like the metaphor there. I really do. Yeah, well, you know what? That's what we're doing right here. But we all individually have to do this, right? Even if we're not the ones teaching, we can lead these Bible studies. You can watch this recorded or live as a group, and then talk about what you heard this crazy dude at his art desk talk about, right? This doesn't have to be hard. It really doesn't. The problem is we have this idea that churches, that Christians, it needs to be elaborate, and we have to have a seminary degree. No. Like having a physical church to me is a wonderful thing. Having pastors with seminary degrees are wonderful things, but there is an over-reliance on them. Any good thing can become a crutch, and that crutch becomes a chain, and that's where we're at. We got to break the chains. So all of us have to do these things. We all have to call our friends to account, and we all have to bring them into and change their minds. We all have to get out there. We can't do this on our own. This one channel can't. The Fundamentalists channel can't. Y'all have to go out there and be doers of this Christianity, not hearers of it. And I know that y'all are. Now to answer what I think is a slightly fun question, we are the ones that have dominion, which is why seeing Sasquatch is such a shock for people. I don't think you're wrong. I'll say it that way. I think you have, and I said, once we come to the Nephilim, we are going to talk about Bigfoot, because I think because it always gets brought up. So I figure there's a place there. I think the thing about Bigfoot is because it's so physically powerful, and because we've been told it doesn't exist, right? I mean, stop thinking about it. We've been told these things don't exist. Because of how powerful they are, I think it does cause a lot of people to go, whoa, what's going on here, right? Sorry, I just saw Titan's quote is reading. I think because of how powerful they are and how intelligent they are, and I don't necessarily think that they are human level intelligence. I know some people are like, oh, they're superhuman. No, they're not. But we'll talk about that later. I do think that it usually causes us to call these things into question, because if we look at these really large, powerful animals like elephants or rhinoceri, and by the way, I'm not saying octopuses, I'm not saying rhinoceroses, I'm not saying platypuses. It is rhinoceri, it is platypi, it is octopi. I am not, absolutely on no circumstances, bowing down to this dumbing down of the English language. There is a line that has to be drawn in the sand, and for me, is replacing the plurals, not having it. But a lot of these animals, now again, elephants are very, very intelligent, but they can also be tamed. They actually may be animals that were done, like we talked about on Thursday, in the Garden of Eden as well. But they're very intelligent, but they can be tamed. You can train them. You can't really do that with rhinoceri. So it's like with elephants, we kind of understand that we can train them, and with rhinoceri, they're just too dumb. We can kind of avoid them. But Sasquatch, I think, is that creature that it's in between. It's intelligent, and I think we instinctively know we can't tame them. So they almost are. Their presence is almost a threat to us. It's like we were understanding that, hold up, this is not a friendly relationship we're going to have, right? So I think that's a big aspect to it, is that we understand that with them, if we're not heavily armed, we are prey. We don't like being prey, and we get that. But I also think the big reason it's such a shock to people is they've been told they don't exist. I mean, if you think Bigfoot exists and you come across one, you're going to be surprised, but your world is not going to be shaken. I think a lot of people have their world shaken because they were told they don't exist. Look, I mean, if I were to walk around and be told, hey, trains don't exist, and I see a train, I'm going to be like, what the heck is going on? If y'all have never seen Moscow on the Hudson, I don't necessarily recommend it. It's not a great movie. But Robin Williams in the 80s plays this Russian who ends up defecting to the U.S. And he's helping out these people he's living with, and he goes to shop for them. And he stands in the middle of this, because he's been told to, they need coffee, and they need ketchup, and some other things. And he literally passes out screaming coffee, because he stands in an aisle where there's nothing but different brands and flavors of coffee. And he can't comprehend that, because for him, there was coffee, and it was what the government provided. And if you got it, you got it. Like there's this scene in the very early where he's trying to get shoes, and the guy who hands him, he goes, but these aren't my size. He goes, it's the best we got. And so you see him later having to trade out those shoes for something else with some other people. But the idea that he could make a choice of what brand of coffee to buy or what brand of ketchup to buy, it broke him. And it's a great example of what I think happens to a lot of people with Sasquatch is they see Sasquatch or a pterodactyl or any number of these creatures that we're told are extinct or don't exist. It's a mind breaker. It's a world breaker. Your worldview changes radically. So that's where I think a lot of that comes from. But I do think that no small part of that is the realization of, hey, that creature is smart, and I don't think it's friendly. Now, I know some people are like, oh, but they're the great forest ninjas. They love everyone. Mm-mm. Anything that big and that predatory ain't necessarily your friend. Now, I don't think they're necessarily overly aggressive, although sometimes they do seem to be. I think they're just like any other creature, right? But the fact is, the matter is, we understand that they're not like an elephant. An elephant you can tame. I don't think these creatures are going to be tamed. And I think we know this on an instinctive level. It's sort of like looking at a dog and realizing that dog is not friendly. So I do think that's absolutely part of it. I think the real trauma comes from the fact that you're having your entire worldview reshaped. Like with, I think my dog just opened the door. Ellie, what are you doing? Hello, Ellie. Well, she wanted to come visit. Anyway, I'm wrapping up. So yeah, we'll catch y'all tonight on Hidden Existence. I guess Danielle and I will be. It's technically anything goes, so it'll be fun. I don't know what we have planned, but we'll. My little dog here is being destructive. Ellie, come here. Say hi to everybody since you decided to come in. Come here. Oh, you're getting heavy. She's getting heavy. Say hi to everybody. See? Yeah, I know. So we're gonna say goodbye. We'll see you tonight on Anything Goes on Danielle's channel. And I think Ellie, you're gonna say goodbye to the nice people. How about to the fundamentalist? I think he'd like you to say goodbye. That's it. All right. We'll catch y'all later. Bye.